Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving straight into decoding the foundational rules of engagement for doing business within the Vietnamese economic ecosystem.
So, before you even think about stepping onto the playing field, every entrepreneur, trader, and investor out there has got to ask one absolutely crucial question. What is the ultimate framework governing transactions, resolving disputes, and really just defining the very nature of commerce in this market? I mean, you can't play the game effectively if you don't actually know the rules, right? Well, that framework is the 2005 Commercial Law. Honestly, you should think of this document as your indispensable onboarding manual for navigating what is a pretty high-stakes commercial environment. It literally defines everything, from what a merchant actually is, to exactly how international trade operates within, or even just in relation to Vietnam. It's the absolute core of the commercial legal system here. Our structural blueprint today is going to cover 6 distinct areas: the playing field, the ground rules, guest players, the main event, advanced arenas, and finally, the service sector. Let's get into it. Section 1. The playing field. Let's look at authorized merchants. The law very clearly defines our key players as merchants, and that umbrella includes lawfully established economic organizations as well as individuals who are operating independently and on a continuous basis. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is that they have a strict obligation to possess official business registration. But kind of interestingly, it's worth noting that even if someone goes ahead and conducts commercial activities without having registered yet, the law still holds them fully legally accountable for their actions. You can't just fly under the radar. And to keep the power balanced in this ecosystem, the law establishes some really strong consumer protections. Article 14 dictates that merchants are legally accountable for literally whatever they bring to the market. They are strictly obligated to provide full, truthful information to consumers about their goods and services. And they bear the absolute, undeniable responsibility for both the quality and the legality of what they're selling.
Section 2. The ground rules and fundamental principles.
This entire ecosystem operates on a few unshakable pillars. First up is the total equality of all economic sectors before the law. Second is the absolute freedom of voluntary agreement, meaning there is no way any party can force, threaten, or impose terms on another. The law also respects your established commercial habits and customs between parties, as long as they don't contradict the actual law, of course. Oh, and this brilliantly illustrates how forward-thinking this 2005 law actually is. It explicitly recognizes data messages, like your emails or electronic records, as having the exact same legal validity as physical written texts. Pretty cool. All right, Section 3, guest players. Let's talk about foreign entities. There is a massive, crucial, strategic distinction for foreign players who want a footprint in Vietnam. If you decide to establish a representative office, well, your hands are kind of tied. You simply cannot execute direct profit-making activities. You're strictly limited to things like market research, hiring local staff, and general promotion. But a branch? That operates entirely differently. A branch is fully authorized to negotiate contracts, generate actual profit, and conduct robust, day-to-day commercial activities right there in the country. Now, here's a really fascinating strategic maneuver: foreign direct investment, or FDI. If a foreign merchant decides to go all in and establishes an FDI enterprise entirely within the country, following the forms prescribed by Vietnamese law, they effectively step onto the field with a brand new identity. Legally speaking, that FDI enterprise is treated exactly the same as a domestic Vietnamese merchant. They become fully integrated into the local commercial ecosystem. Moving on to Section 4, the main event, buying and selling. So how do you actually lock in a deal? Well, unless a specific law explicitly dictates that your transaction requires a formal written document, the commercial law actually gives you an incredible amount of flexibility. You can establish your commercial contracts in 3 ways. Obviously through a written document, or through a verbal agreement, or, and this is the fascinating one, through specific behavioral acts that clearly imply an agreement has been made. But what happens when things inevitably go wrong? Let's trace the timeline for the transfer of risk. Say your goods get lost or damaged in transit. Who foots the bill? Well, if you have a specific destination agreed upon, the risk transfers to the buyer the moment the goods arrive there. Makes sense. But if your contract involves transportation and no specific delivery location was set, the risk legally transfers to the buyer the absolute second those goods are handed over to the first carrier. That is a massive, game-changing detail to remember when you're structuring your logistics. And sellers, you really need to take note here, because you carry strict defensive obligations under this framework. You absolutely must guarantee undisputed ownership rights, meaning absolutely no third party can come out of the woodwork and claim those goods. You cannot sell goods that violate intellectual property rights, period. If the goods are tied up as collateral for a debt security, you have to notify the buyer upfront. Plus, you're on the hook for any defects that existed before that transfer of risk we just talked about. And if there's a warranty, you're obligated to fulfill it promptly, completely, at your own cost.
Section 5 brings us to the advanced arenas, commodity exchanges.
Trading on these organized exchanges mostly involves two specific types of contracts. A futures contract is a strict, mandatory commitment. You agree today to buy or sell a specific amount of goods at a future date, and you absolutely must execute that trade. An options contract, on the other hand, is a totally different beast. Here, you pay a premium, just a specific amount of money up front, to purchase the right to buy or sell at a set price. You get the right to choose, but there's no mandatory obligation to actually pull the trigger and execute the trade if the market turns against you.
To maintain the integrity of what is a highly volatile advanced arena, the law places some very strict boundaries on exchange brokers. They are absolutely prohibited from promising guaranteed profits or offering to compensate clients for their losses out of pocket. They can't execute any trades without a formally signed client contract. They are completely banned from using fake pricing to manipulate or deceive the market. And they cannot unreasonably delay executing a client's order. It's all about keeping the game fair.
Finally, Section 6, the service sector, focusing on commercial services.
Now, this is one of the most vital distinctions you'll find in service contracts. Service providers are bound by one of two legal standards. If the nature of the service requires an obligation by result, the provider absolutely must achieve the specific outcome that aligns with the contract. No excuses. But if the service is defined as an obligation by best efforts, the law simply states the provider has to use their absolute highest capability and effort to achieve the desired result, even if the perfect outcome isn't entirely within their control.
But hey, the customer is definitely not just a passive player in this dynamic. To actually make this work, the law places strict obligations right back on the client using the service. Beyond just paying your bills on time, you are legally required to provide timely instructions, plans, and necessary details. You have to actively cooperate so the provider doesn't face unnecessary delays. And if you're a customer juggling multiple service providers on one big project, it is your legal obligation to coordinate those activities so nobody gets in each other's way. So, to wrap this all up, the 2005 commercial law establishes a highly predictable, incredibly structured environment. It beautifully balances the freedom to contract with some very strict accountability. Whether you're hashing out a verbal contract for physical goods, setting up a shiny new foreign branch, or trading complex options on a commodity exchange, this framework is what empowers both domestic and foreign merchants to operate fairly and securely. As you look toward participating in Vietnam's economy, I really want to leave you with this thought. In a rapidly evolving, highly competitive global market, how will a deep understanding of these foundational rules shape your next big business move? Because at the end of the day, knowing the law isn't just about basic compliance, it's about competitive strategy. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this deep dive gives you exactly the edge you need.